Welcome to Unearthly Upstate. I am Ari.
And I am Matthew.
And today we are doing a true crime.
Yes, 2 previous episodes for food.
Yep.
And now we're back to gruesome.
Gruesome, yes. This is gruesome. And we're going to discuss the case of Mary Farmer, who was the second woman to be executed by electric chair in the state of New York.
Now, interesting, there were 9 female criminals who were hung in the under the capital punishment statutes in the state of New York previous to that.
Right.
And so they switched over. And this brings to mind this story about the series about Tesla and
the one we just
Thomas
watched.
Elvis.
Yeah,
the one
movie.
we just watched. Oh, that was. I'm sorry, it wasn't a series. It was a movie. What was it called again?
Tesla.
Tesla, right. All right. And the difficulties involved with developing electrocution as a means of execution. Now, that's going to come into play here.
Yeah.
That's the real horror show here.
A little bit, yeah.
Along with Mary Farmer.
Yes, Mary Farmer, a lot of the articles and that I was reading about her just started with her murder. And I look through New York historical newspapers all the time for sources. And so I decided, what the heck, let's see if she made it into the paper prior to the horrendous act she did. And there were a couple Mary Farmers that popped up in this area. Now, this happened in Brownville, New York, which is up near Watertown. Mm-hmm. So the first time, this might be her, but the first time I found her name mentioned in the newspaper was in May 8th, 1907, where Alfred Wall, he basically had been arrested and thrown in jail because he owed a debt to Mary Farmer. He was able to prove that that was false. He didn't owe her a debt, and they had to let him go. Now, like I said, I'm not sure it was the same Mary Farmer. I did find one notice that Mary and James Farmer had owned a property prior to this one. Now, you got to keep this in mind. This is all about property as well. This crime had everything to do with property. That's why I'm bringing this up.
And fraud.
If that's the case. I couldn't find any more information, but it fit. She had the husband was the same name. It was the same area. Very possibly. But then Mary Farmer, is a very common name, actually, if you think about it. I mean, it wasn't like it was, Mary Zephias or something like that.
Right, exactly.
Mary Farmer. Well, like I said, this crime has to do with property, has to do with fraud, and it has to do with murder. So.
Well, you want to go through the timeline first?
Yeah, I'm going to go through, and we'll just discuss each step of each thing, okay? Yeah. Well, sometime in the fall of 1907, Mary and James had a child, Peter. Now, this was their second child. The first child had died. I'm not sure. She was fairly young. She was like in her mid or late 20s, Mary was. Mm-hmm. And about the time they had their son, James loses his job at the paper mill. Now, add a little twist to this right away. James' supervisor was also their landlord, a man named Patrick, or Patsy as people called him, Patrick Brennan. Oh, that's a nasty situation right there. You get fired from your job and your supervisor's your landlord.
How awkward.
That's very awkward. But this happened in the fall. That's got to be an awkward situation. And I wasn't given an exact time when he was laid off or anything. All I was told was the fall. But the big day is Halloween. This is when the plan gets put in motion. What's going to happen. So on October 31st, 1907, Mary Farmer goes to Watertown and goes to the offices of Attorney Francis Burns. And she comes in claiming that she is Sarah Brennan, who is the wife of Patrick Brennan. So she's pretending to be their landlord's wife. And she has a deed drawn up and a bill of sale that is to prove that they bought the Brennan's house, that she's saying, as Sarah, she's pretending to be Sarah, that they sold their house to Mary and James Farmer for $2,100. So it'd be about, I saw estimates like between $50,000 to $75,000.
Now, this was the deed for both.
Both homes,
Yeah, both the tenement and for the house.
Yes, yeah.
Now, this is one of those situations where you've got two structures on one property under the same deed. Now, we've lived under situations like that while we were in North Syracuse. So that's plausible.
Yes, very plausible.
But the thing is, without breaking too much rhythm here, I always wondered, what? She got this deed drawn up.
Yeah.
Where'd she find it?
That's one thing they don't talk about, but she came in there with the bill of sale, was able to convince his attorney that she was Sarah Brennan.
Yeah.
And he was able to drop a new deed for her based on the paperwork she gave, including the other deed.
Mm-hmm. Plus a false bill of sale.
All
this stuff had to look legit.
Yeah. Yeah, so we're talking about a very good forger here.
I know. No kidding.
Yeah.
Did she draw up the deed herself, or did she go to get somebody to do it? It sounds like a solo job.
It is. It does sound like so. I believe it was a solo job. I'll get to my theories at the end here too. Mm-hmm. And when she was asked about, well, where did they get the money? She asked Sarah. She says, "Oh, well, Mary told me her uncle gave her the money." Mm-hmm. Legally, Mary owns Sarah's house because the attorney, either she was very convincing or he wasn't paying attention. He didn't catch it right then. All right. So January 7th, Mary then transfers the deed of the Brennan house, and we're still going to call it the Brennan house because that's where the Brennans were living, transferred it to her 10-month-old son, Peter.
Wow. To use that as that's really kind of a sly technique a lot of parents use. Is certifying stuff, doing things like this in their kids' names.
Right. Now, the next thing...
Tax evasion. The
next thing they do about the same time on January 7th is they also transferred the insurance from the Brennans to the Farmers. Now, you work in insurance.
Yeah. That's difficult to do, even back then.
Yes.
Because, they really keep a tight rein on what's on the property, what goes into it, what it's made of, who's there, why it's there, who it's for, what they do there. If they run a business out of their home, what's
in this
their
case, they kind of do
descriptions
their
of operations, basically. Yeah. And, you've got a home with a tenement on the property.
Yeah.
Yeah, that stands out.
Now, okay, you may think, okay, she fooled that attorney, but look who else she had to fool. She had to go fool that clerk, the clerk at the Register of Deeds to get her son's name on it.
To make it all convincing.
But that was probably not that hard to do since she already had the paperwork from the attorney showing that it was a legit sale, which it wasn't.
No.
But the insurance one, I'm really shocked that went through with that it did.
That is certainly interesting that she would be able to pull a sly one over on any underwriters.
I know, yes, she could show that paperwork, says, yes, I own it now. Now I'm responsible for the insurance. But here's the thing. They had lost their previous house because they were not able to pay for it. James had lost his job, and there's no even hint that Mary worked outside the home at all.
Yeah.
So,
in fact, she had the baby.
How did they pay for the insurance between January and when the
January 7th, 1908 to the time when they got caught?
Yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah.
I'm sure
this is a pretty solid grift. I gotta give Mary Farmer credit. This is wow.
So also about that time, rumors start going around town that the Farmers have bought the Brennan's property. And of course, the Brennans are like, no.
No way.
What are you guys talking about? We never sold our property,
No way.
And,
you'd be surprised, though, nowadays.
Yeah.
This is this kind of thing always happened, but there's a spike now right now in the year 2020 of people losing their deeds because of hackers online.
Oh, I believe it, yeah.
Yeah, and now we're aware of it, but it's real easy just to hack in to the records and then change them.
Yeah.
And then you'll come home to put your key in the door and it don't fit.
Well, guess what? Something very similar happened, right? So now I skip ahead to April 23rd, 1908. Sarah was last seen walking into the farmer's yard. Apparently, there was a report where she was still wearing black because they had lost a child, and it was very poetic description in this newspaper article about how she was seen walking towards the farmers, in their yard to the house that they were renting, or supposedly renting. Later that day, Patrick returns home from work, and first thing he notices is the doors are locked. Well, that's okay, he reaches behind the shutter where they keep an extra house key. Key's gone.
Oh.
So he goes out to the barn, thinking, probably to get a tool or something to break himself into his own house, because now he's probably thinking, oh my God, what's happening to my wife? You know. The barn's locked up.
Okay.
Okay, this is what he walks into. About the time he's panicking, what the heck's going on, James comes over and says, oh, by the way, we own your house now.
Oh.
You gotta leave.
Oh, yeah, so they evict him?
Yeah, the first night they just tell him he's gotta leave.
Uh-huh.
So, of course, now Patrick's like, well, where's my wife? And they're like, at first they say they don't know. Well, James says he doesn't know. Mm-hmm. But they got proof that she sold them the property and that Sarah had been paying rent to them for $2 a week since October.
Well, that doesn't just sound right, because they've been together for 25 years. Yeah. And they said that, well, she just up and left. She just gave me, signed all the property over to me and took off. And took off.
Yeah.
Because presumably she's through with you.
Patrick's very confused and wondering what's happening to his wife. He ends up going over, I'm not sure where he stayed that first night, but he ended up the next night at a friend named James Rattery. And the next day, April 24th, that's when he gets the official eviction notice. So he can't stay out. And also a bill of sale to all the items inside the house. So now they're saying, not only you're evicted, but your wife sold all that stuff to us.
Oh, wow.
So everything in the barn, everything in the house now belongs to the farmers. And then the farmers say, well, she said she was going to visit some friends in Watertown, or maybe she'd taken off for Duluth. That's why she wanted to sell everything. She wanted to go to Duluth and start a new life. Okay, that's what James reports to Patrick. Now, I want to stop here at this point. So far, it's just James and Patrick talking to each other.
And James doesn't know what Mary's done at this point.
I believe so. We can talk about this in more depth, but I think at this point, he's telling Patrick what he believes is the truth. That Sarah sold him the place, had been paying them $2 a week. I can picture Mary saying that before he lost his job, she'd been very frugal with his money and saved up, and they were able to buy the property. That's not what happened, of course. So yeah, I do believe at this point, James doesn't know what's going on. I think Mary has boondoggled him as well. Okay. And of course, think about it, James' point of view, he's been laid off, and now his wife came into some money, and now they're going to get a nice house. He doesn't have to worry about paying rent. I think for him it was a relief. And I don't know what the relationship was him and the supervisor were, but maybe he felt kind of good kicking his supervisor out.
Got some satisfaction out of that.
Yeah, exactly. So,
back at you.
Yep. The next day, Patrick finally calls his lawyer. Now, this time, he hasn't called the police. He still doesn't know. I think the guy's shell-shocked, and he really doesn't know what's going on.
Wouldn't anybody be?
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness sakes. Here's this Well, I don't know.
Yeah.
Guy I fired
Uh-huh.
from the job
Mm-hmm.
who owes me rent money.
Yeah.
Telling me that, to get out of my own house.
Yeah.
That is...
And the wife's gone.
Shocking.
And his
yeah,
wife's
and your
gone.
wife has disappeared.
Right. So anyway, the next day, Patrick calls his lawyer, Floyd Carlisle, who calls the attorney Brown, was it? Burns. Calls Attorney Burns.
Mm-hmm.
The Attorney Burns, as they have the conversation, they realize it was Mary Farmer that showed up at the Attorney Burns' office, not Sarah Brennan.
Now they've got positive identification.
So now Floyd Carlisle calls Sheriff Bellinger.
And here's where the grift starts to fall apart.
Okay, but Bellinger doesn't act right away. It is the weekend, and I'm sure they had to get paperwork and everything together.
Absolutely, yeah.
While this is going on, the farmers are moving into the Brennan's house.
Boy.
Interesting thing was Sarah was really overseeing the moving of it, and wouldn't allow anyone outside the family to help them move. There were people who were coming over and offering to help.
Might this have something to do with a suspicious trunk?
Yes, and we're getting to that. So the police show up now on the 27th, and they want to look at the farmer's house. Now they're moved out of the farmer's house. The family is moving to the Brennan's house. So the police invite Patrick Brennan and James Farmer to come with them, because right now we don't know who owns the property. Obviously something's going on. So they have the two men come with them. They go into the house they had been renting. They find a coat stained with blood hidden between a bed and a wall. They find an axe in the yard also covered in blood. But I'm going to say that wasn't a real aha moment, because this was a time period where there were a lot of axe murders, and the reason there were a lot of axe murders was everybody owned an axe, and you would use it for things like cutting wood or killing chickens. And
absolutely.
So I don't think
so
that
it was not incongruous to have an axe.
So that wasn't a big we found the axe, they killed somebody. No, it was like, they must have killed some chickens, but they had to take it. They kept it as evidence anyway. Right. So they go to the summer kitchen. Now, should I explain what a summer kitchen is?
Please do.
Okay. Before air conditioning, it was common to have homes that had a summer and winter kitchen. And a summer kitchen usually was out in the open more. So all the cooking and the cooking in the ovens and that could be done outside, and the heat would supposedly stay outside. Now, like when we went to the Schuyler home up near Saratoga, they had that wonderful summer kitchen.
Beautiful house, by the way. Go visit.
Yes,
highly recommended.
Granted, that was a upper end summer kitchen.
Oh yeah.
But this would probably be the same situation. It'd be a house. It would be a room either not connected, so it'd be like a little shed, or it would be off the back, like a back porch, and that's where you do your cooking in the summer. And then sometimes, if they got places that were really well designed, like I think it was the Schuyler house, the summer stove, or the wood stove, was connected to the winter one inside, so you had the same flue and everything, so it was very, that wasn't common, but that was used. But this is where they went. They went into the summer kitchen, and there's a smell in the summer kitchen. Like
strong,
pungent smell, like somebody left some meat out. And it's coming from a trunk.
Pig.
And they open the trunk, and I'm going to read.
Oh, no, wait a minute. Not too fast.
Okay. What do you want to say?
They did find stuff in that closet. Other things as well, other cases. And there was more than one trunk as well. But this trunk was on the floor, and it was oozing blood. Right.
And it was also smelled like rotten meat.
Yeah.
So I'm going to read this. This is from an article called The Forged Deed and a Bloody Trunk, Mary Farmer's Plot to Steal Her Landlord's Home by Michelle Debzovik. I'm just going to read it verbatim because I found it wonderful. A black skirt had been draped over it, and the stocking feet poking out from the edges of the covering suggested it was a woman. The body was mutilated until recognition was almost impossible, It lay contorted with the feet pointing upward and the face pressed down against the gore-smeared trunk floor. The head appeared to be the source of the blood, and the back was caved in and an ear is missing. There is a mistake, though, with that description. I'm going to read you what the coroner report said and see if you can catch where the mistake is. There were 3 cuts to her left wrist. The left ear was severed, 3-inch gash behind it. The lips were cut through, and the forehead had 1 long cut across the eyebrows. The left jaw was broken.
Wow.
There's no... She was not... The head was not caved in.
No.
But she was obviously struck, caved in from behind, I should say. All the attack was to the front.
Wow.
Probably lifted her hand up, the block. That's where she got the gashes on her arm.
Yeah, defensive. Defensive wounds.
Now remember, both James and Patrick are there when they find the body, and immediately Patrick recognizes his wife, and then turns around and asks James why he did it. And James
fingers James immediately.
James is like, I had no idea. I had nothing to do with this. Okay?
His face has gone white because all the blood has gone to his feet.
Yeah. So then Mary's brought in, and apparently she stood there for a moment looking at the body. And then she said, oh yeah, I struck her with the axe from behind. I killed her.
Just drops that right there in front of her.
Yeah. Of course, now her husband's sitting there going, what? And Patrick is sitting there going, what?
Just shock after shock with the situation between the... Oh my goodness sakes, in a space of about 24 hours.
Now here's the thing. Mary says right away she struck her from behind.
Uh-huh.
And a lot of people say, oh yeah, her head was caved in from behind. But when you look at the coroner report, there was no attack from behind. It was all in the front. So, like Lizzie Borden...
So where'd the idea that she had her head caved in?
There is a lot of, I would say, telephone-esque reporting on this one. Mm-hmm. Because some were saying, oh, she killed her landlord, then changed the deed. No, she changed the deed months before that.
Oh, yeah.
And then some were saying, oh, she dressed up like her. Like, no, I don't know if she did.
So she pulled off that grift.
Yeah.
Over at the Register of Deeds.
Mm-hmm. Over the attorney, yeah.
Well, it would be now, but over to the attorneys. Mm-hmm. And then this was a long time planning.
Yeah.
For this murder, so there was plenty of. It wasn't a crime of passion. It wasn't. No, very planned out. It wasn't. Oh, you fired my husband. Your husband fired my husband. So I'm going to take everything you have. Kind of thing. Yeah. But what was the timeline, though, on the change for the deed when Mary pulled off the grift and the time when her husband was fired from his job?
That I wasn't sure. There was no... It happened in the fall, is all I heard. And she changed the deed October 31st. It may have been a couple weeks. It may have been a month. But it definitely was recent to when she did it. Right.
But that would be interesting to find out.
Yeah, I couldn't get an exact date on when he was laid off. So all I was told it was sometime in the fall, and then October 31st when she did the
Because the firing, forgery. I'm trying to establish whether or not the firing was any motivation.
I'm wondering as well. There was one other time Mary was mentioned with her husband, and it was basically a reading of a will. That happened like a year prior to all this happening. Okay. So I'm wondering if I didn't put that in my research because I wasn't 100% sure it was the same couple, even though it was the same town and everything. But how about this? They were expecting money from a relative. They go to that.
She was expecting money from that uncle.
This is my theory. Okay. They go to that reading the will and found they got nothing. So now they're still stuck there, and well, at least James has got a job. They got a kid on the way, whatever. And then he gets fired from his job. Well, now they've been out of the money they thought they were going to get. He's lost his job. So I bet, she was thinking, how can I turn this around? And of course, who becomes the target? Mm-hmm. The supervisor, who happens to be their landlord. They've got a nice house. Right. And I am shocked. I don't know anything about her past.
And all this stuff's in the wife's name.
Yeah, and I don't know anything about Mary's past and how she was able to pull it off. Did she work for a lawyer?
Exactly.
Yeah, at one time?
And how did she find out? Did she get it out of the woman she usurped? Mm-hmm. That everything was in her name? So then she could go to the lawyers posing as her? That's
a good question, because it would be very uncommon in the 1900s, early 1900s. So that's a good question. And I couldn't find anybody even thought of looking that up before.
Blimey.
Well, of course, now James and Mary they're not officially arrested, but they are taken down to the jail. They're officially arrested on May 1st. Mm-hmm. And they're both arrested for the murder of the landlady. Now, Mary keeps changing her stories. Remember, she said, I hit her from behind. And then it's like, no, I had nothing to do with it. James did it. She changes her stories repeatedly.
Didn't she at one point claim it was self-defense?
Yeah, when she said that, when they kind of confronted her, like, no, all the blows are from the front, she's like, oh yeah, well that's because Sarah came after me. And I just happened to grab the first thing next to me, and it was the axe. So she kept changing her story.
Yeah.
And what happened. Okay, so May 6th is the first hearing, which is to decide, if they're going to have a grand jury or regular, and they decide to move to a grand jury. On June 9th, there's like hundreds of people outside the courthouse just to witness the trial. And now Mary Farmer is the first woman to be tried for murder in Jefferson County. So that, big news. And like, I heard a description that she was wearing a blue dress with white stripes, so she was wearing like a prisoner dress when they brought her in, and she didn't say anything during the whole this particular hearing.
Said she was very stoic.
Yes, she didn't say anything. Now James is the whole time saying, I had nothing to do with this. I didn't even know she did it. I thought this was all legit, But people think he had something to do with it. And boy, the papers got him bad. Oh my gosh! Have you read some of the paper articles about him?
Oh my, the slander.
He was the mastermind behind it. But, as things come out, I think even at the time, I don't think James would have thought of doing anything like this. Yeah. I really don't. So at the beginning, people really were blaming him, but as things came out, their opinions started to change, but he was still considered to be part of the murder plot. Because they were like, how could she get away with this without her husband knowing? Well, that's a question they're still asking people. How did that serial killer get away with it with his family not knowing? Criminals can be very smart and be very manipulative, especially among people they live with. So, but the trial doesn't end up well for either of them. They're both sentenced to death, and they're both sent to Auburn to await the death penalty.
Auburn!
Yes. We may have to cover Auburn State Prison just by itself.
Exactly, yeah.
So she is the second woman in New York to be scheduled to die in the electric chair. And James he's also scheduled to face electrocution as well. And remember, they're both staying in Auburn, but they're staying in separate cells. That may sound odd, but I think it was Auburn and one other place were the only other place that had death rows in New York State. I want to say Sing Sing was the other one. I could be wrong. So I'll have to look that up. There's certain prisons that are set aside to do certain things, and Auburn was the one for the death penalty. So the day of her execution, March 29th, 1909.
My birthday, incidentally. Yeah. March 29th.
Yeah. Mary writes a statement that she acted alone in the murder and the fraud plot, and that this clears her husband.
So she signs an affidavit.
She signs an affidavit. She confessed to a priest and basically finally admitted the truth. Finally, her story matched up with the evidence. That her landlady came over that day probably to collect back rent.
Probably.
Mary attacked her from the front with an axe, killed her, stuffed her in the trunk. And then,
but she had already had the deed switched over.
Right, she had already had so this was definitely premeditated.
Definitely, yeah.
And
she was probably waiting for her to get into a huff about the rent and storm over there.
Yeah.
So that
she could claim self-defense.
She could really, yeah, exactly.
But she kind of screwed it up. So this confession does reverse the decision on James's case. He is released from Auburn, but then he's sent up to Jefferson County and tried for the forgery, but he is acquitted of that. And in fact, it's very interesting when you read how the ending of that trial, people actually stood up and clapped. They shook his hands. They basically said they were sorry for him. Mm-hmm. So when the truth came out, James, he ended up being kind of welcomed back up there. And everybody was like, dude,
he went back to work at the mill.
Yeah, he even went back to work when he got laid off.
Yeah, lived his life out there.
Yeah. So, yeah, it ended great for James. I mean, you would think what happened and all the accusations, he wouldn't have been able to show his face back up there again, but...
Up in Brownville.
But they welcomed him back, and they apologized, and people were, really sympathetic to him. I mean, think about it. He was just as duped as everyone else, Yeah,
and it was all a solo act.
And if you're wondering where their son ended up, Peter, he ended up with a relative. I believe their aunt, James's sister took him, I believe. I can't remember. So the child was okay.
Right.
Yeah, so that is basically the case of Mary Farmer. I found it fascinating. I really did.
Well, then what happened to Patrick then? He straightened out all the paperwork, got his house back, and
he got everything back. But
at least,
he had to deal with the death of his wife, and
he lost his wife for 25 years.
Yeah,
to a brutal axe murder.
Right. But just think of the planning. I think...
Oh, I know.
Oh, my God.
That's what interests me. Let's go back to the timeline.
Was she going to kill Patrick, too? Makes you wonder.
Patrick was part of the... oh, boy.
Yeah. I do think the killing of Sarah was a spur-of-the-moment thing.
Leaving him alive
made
the grift kind of fall apart.
Yeah.
Because if they both disappeared under mysterious circumstances, it would definitely be investigated still. Right. And if they had any relatives, then they would definitely take an interest.
So she was very smart up to a point.
Yes, exactly.
Very smart up to a point. That's why I don't think she was planning on killing Sarah or even if she was planning to kill her at all, but when she did, I do think it was a situation with Sarah, maybe all those rumors, and probably they owed him back rent, went over to confront her about it. And that was it for Sarah. I mean, Mary takes the axe and attacks her with it. And now all of a sudden she's got to move quickly. If James was in on it, he had the perfect opportunity to get rid of Patrick.
Oh, yeah.
But he never did.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Yeah, the loss of the only job he had. With no other money and a child on the way, and facing eviction.
Yeah.
That's a really a dual kind of situation. Boy, that's really depressing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be double the humiliation.
Right.
Getting fired by this guy and then getting evicted by him. That's a lot of motivation there.
But the eviction would never have held. Now, let's think. They tried to evict him. The eviction would never have held if Mary hadn't killed Sarah, but the paperwork would have came out that, they sold the property. But, of course, then the Browns were saying, we never did that. Then the fraud would have came out. So I think it was her way to try to cover up the fraud by killing Sarah, but not killing Patrick. Kind of fell it apart.
Absolutely.
And like I said, if James was in on it, he could have, when he came over there to confront Patrick that night, he could have killed him that night.
Oh, yeah.
If he was in on it, but he didn't. So I think Mary sent him over there saying, hey, kick him off our property. His wife took off today. She was upset. She's going to Duluth. Why Duluth? Why Duluth?
Yeah, that's weird.
I mean, Watertown, I understand. That's not far from Brownsville. Duluth,
Wisconsin.
Duluth, Minnesota. Superior, Wisconsin.
Oh, I'm sorry. Superior. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. That's right. Superior, Wisconsin is right across
from Duluth, Minnesota. The Twin Ports, yes.
Yeah, okay. All right.
Place where I saw a fireworks display explode on the ground. It was in Duluth, Minnesota. I was over on the Superior side because you can see both fireworks going off. And we're watching the display over at the Duluth side, and we're on the Superior side. And we all kind of noticed at the same time this one firework went off kind of low to the ground. And then all the fireworks went off all low to the ground. So then Superior had to quickly put their fireworks on, so people were watching that and were distracted and weren't trying to leave while they were trying to evacuate people from the Duluth side. And thankfully nobody was hurt. But yeah, that's my story about Duluth, Minnesota.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the method of execution.
Oh, the electrocution, yes, because they...
A very dubious kind of thing at first when they introduced it, because they weren't quite sure how many volts.
And they were doing it wrong. Like
yeah,
we saw
exactly.
the Tesla movie. They didn't wet the sponge, so it wasn't conducting properly, and basically burned that man alive.
Yeah, cooked him from the inside out.
Cooked him from the inside out. And when
How
Edison
terrible.
was asked about it, all he said was, well, they didn't do it properly. And why... I don't know. It stuck.
And this was also during the time when there was a lot of controversy,
Yeah.
drummed up by Edison and those like-minded, about
The safety of the
this
AC.
flirtation, with alternating current.
Yeah, alternating current, yeah.
And they didn't understand fully the dynamics of electricity back then.
Oh, yeah, Edison was going around electrocuting elephants to prove how dangerous it was. I'm not kidding.
Yeah. What a twat.
That would be a fascinating podcast for somebody who wants to do it. Just how many animals were killed by electrocution in the United States?
Didn't he also electrocute a dog or something like that?
Yeah.
And someone accidentally got electrocuted to death when they went up to inspect.
So I don't know about that one, but I there was a lot of animals. He killed a lot of animals.
He did. But anyway, Dr. John Guerin was the prison physician at the time, and said that she was dead after the first shock. The electrocution that she was given was 1,840 volts, or 7.5 amperes.
Oh my God!
So bear that in mind. Low amps.
Yeah.
You don't want higher. Just 7.5 amps.
Yeah.
To kill you. And well, that's up 1,840.
What is it? The volts that kill you, not the amp? Wait, what is that saying? What killed you? Is it the volts or the amps? I forget.
Well, volts definitely.
Yeah.
Because there was some muscular tremor going on afterward, and so they gave her another set of jolts.
Oh man.
And then it was determined that she was finally dead. Yeah. And while I just growing up in the farm and coming into contact with things like electric fences.
Oh God.
That's where I temporarily developed a phobia about being electrocuted. When I was younger, because I remember my first experience with it was when I was very young. It was just this bare wire on the fence.
Right.
I didn't understand what it was. Well, nobody really told me either. And or somebody, well, maybe they did. I don't know. But there was this bare wire running across it, and I just went up to touch it. Oh, I got a good jolt in my arm. It didn't go. It didn't go anywhere. The jolt didn't go anywhere past my elbow. But it was very. It was traumatizing for sure.
I bet.
And ever since then, I was really leery of bare wires around the fence. Of course, and that brings up another interesting story about Scratchy, our old ginger cat.
Oh.
And
we're going to talk about animal mutilation. We're going to put explicit on here.
Oh, but this thing is, the poor kitty. We had electric fence, or low-lying electric fence, about a foot and a half, maybe 2 feet above the ground, for the critters, so that the fur-bearing animals wouldn't get into the garden and chew on the lettuce or whatever else we had growing there. But Scratchy, he was nosing around the area, probably looking for something to eat, probably looking for, the garden attracted all kinds of rodents and little crawlies. And the end of his tail curled over that hot fence.
No.
And then he ran, just like a trolley, down the length of the wire, just getting shocked as his tail is making contact with the fence. It's just like a streetcar running straight down.
Was he okay?
Oh, yeah, he was fine.
Okay.
He was all right, but it was a heck of a thing to see.
Oh, my God.
This cat running straight down. You think it would dart either right or left, but no. He ran straight. He ran straight along the line of the fence until he got to the corner, and then he finally dropped.
Oh no!
But we had to check him out and see if he was okay. But he wasn't very good company for the next couple of days. But he finally got over it. But we both did.
Okay.
And electricity. That's nothing to screw around with. My golly.
Now I can't remember the name of the first woman to be executed in New York. Unfortunately, we may discuss her later, but I found this case very interesting. This was definitely premeditated to an extent.
Well, that's for sure.
I mean, like I said, I shouldn't say that because obviously the fraud was premeditated.
Oh, that's, absolutely.
Was the murder premeditated, or was that she just happened to take advantage of the situation?
It's interesting. We don't get a timeline, though, between the time that her husband was fired and the time Mary decided to go ahead and
like I said, it could have been a couple weeks. It could have been a month. All I know is it happened in the fall. Well, that could have been September, or it could have been in
because
August.
If it was after the firing,
that's
motivation.
Oh, I believe there was motivation.
You
I believe they had. Some people said, "Oh, she was just jealous of her landlady." I'm like, no, I think it had more to do with, like you said, her husband's job, and this was her way to get back at them.
And she may not have been motivated to murder.
No, but
maybe she just wanted to steal it from him.
Yeah, which I think was what they're planning to do. But
well, she definitely did.
She was moving very slowly on the fraud. I mean, she did it in October. Then January, she puts her son's name into it.
Very methodical, and then bills of sale for everything.
Yeah,
not just the structures themselves, but all the movables inside as well, as it were, and all of their material wealth too. Yeah, I'm surprised she didn't go down to the bank and seize their assets, whatever accounts they might have had. But that might have been more difficult.
Right.
It was, because if it was a case where any of the banks, any of the places where their landlords would do their banking, they would be recognizable.
The more we're talking about this, I'm thinking the murder happened spontaneously.
Yeah.
Because she was moving very slowly with the griff. Mm-hmm. And I think the next thing they would have done is had the eviction papers drawn up and kicked him out. But whatever that confrontation between her and Sarah happened, that escalated it.
Right, exactly.
And that's probably why she kept changing her story. Mm-hmm. Is she probably didn't remember exactly what happened either, because it was such a spur-of-the-moment thing to attack her with that axe. And if it happened in the Summers kitchen, like I described, they're usually kind of outdoorsy. She probably would have had the axe right there handy.
Yep.
You know? Mm-hmm. So, I don't know. I think it was a very well planned out crime to a point.
Exactly, and until the confrontation.
Yeah.
Which, as you say, escalated things. It was probably just a thieving plot on Mary's part to begin with, but then it wound up being murder. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what I think happened. And poor James, not involved in any of it.
Oh, yeah.
And almost executed himself.
Totally kept in the dark and was going to get executed for a crime he didn't commit.
Yeah.
Ugh.
I wish I knew more about Mary's background. I mean, did she work for the clerk? Did she, how did she know how to do all this stuff?
It seems like she had a lot of experience. Well, she was originally Irish-born.
Yeah.
And then came over to the United States.
But I have nothing about, did she spend any time, where did she work prior to getting married to James?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she did marry him quite young. She was in her 20s.
Right. Well, they did. Back then, a lot
of
people still do, but so it's not uncommon.
So this was a mid-20-year-old doing this too. So it's pretty, think about that as well.
Absolutely.
But yeah, that's Mary Farmer, second woman to be executed in the state of New York. I think I'm done with it.
Well, there's no ghost story behind it. But...
No, which is interesting, but it's a very intriguing true crime. And it's one I kind of stumbled upon.
Yeah, right.
There's another one I'm researching right now that I kind of stumbled upon. It's a little more horrendous than this one is. But I just don't have as many sources, which is kind of interesting because this one, you think about it, it's just fraud and murder. And the other one I've been researching is a far more, shall we say, scandalous crime. And I can barely find anything about it. So I can't say, it's interesting what crimes stay in the public mind and what ones don't. Like this one stayed in the public mind because her tying to being the second woman executed, in New York. And the whole thing with her husband, that makes great storytelling, And other crimes just kind of get forgotten. And the other one I stumbled upon that I want to do more research on, it kind of got forgotten. I actually found it because I was looking up something else that happened and stumbled upon the trial of this guy, And the same thing with Mary Farmer is I had her name written down. I because of the second woman killed, executed in New York. But I never really went into what she had done. And then when I went into what she'd done, it was very interesting, very interesting. But it was surprised me which true crimes stay in the public mind and which ones don't. Exactly. I mean, Lizzie Borden obviously was not the first person to attack and kill people. Well, allegedly, she was acquitted. And it was very common at this time to be killed by axes. I mean...
Yeah, and if she wasn't acquitted, she would have been, at the time, hung.
Yes. Lizzie Borden, you mean. Yes, yeah.
Lizzie.
But there's there's an interesting book about that where it may have been her uncle who did it, or the acquittal happened because family secrets came out and people decided she did not deserve to die for it. So there's a couple theories that go on with Lizzie Borden. But for Mary, she admitted it, but she kept changing her story.
You get these movies that tend to lean towards sensationalism, as they do. And all this, and you really got to dig yourself, no matter what it is you're researching, whether it's a ghost story or true crime or whatnot. Always dig through the source material yourself.
The newspaper articles were very interesting.
Historical tellings.
The newspaper article. And then, like I said, there's some modern sources who say, she was bashed in the back of the head. No, that did not happen. The coroner testifies. I got like 5 or 6 newspaper articles where the coroner testifies there was no attack to the back of Sarah's head.
So it was all frontal.
It was all frontal attack, yeah.
Absolutely.
So,
well, there we have it. I guess that's Mary Farmer.
Yep.
I guess it's where was she? That's right. She was executed by electric chair in an open prison.
Right.
I wonder if she walks.
Well, like I said, we've got to cover Auburn by itself.
The prison.
These days.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, here we go.
Okay.
Thank you very much for listening to our Ghastly podcast.
Bye. Thank you for listening to Unearthly Upstate. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Patreon, and on our webpage. We are also on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Spreaker, Stitcher, Podbean, Google Podcast, and CastBox. Please like, share, and review on your favorite platform. Unearthly Upstate is an Animator Liar production. The show is produced by Mari and Matt Manette, with purring provided by Honey and Lloyd. Research and writing by Mari Manette. Music is by Kevin MacLeod, licensed under Creative Commons Attribution 3.0 license. Unless otherwise stated in the episode, the places mentioned in the broadcast are not paid or contact us for any type of promotion.
Please check out our webpage for credit and sources for the episode. Thank you.